Thanks to our amazing presenting sponsors. You can see them on the screen here. They invest in us to invest in the conversation and the community across the nation. So thank you to everyone, the companies that you see here on screen. We really appreciate your investment and your sponsorship. If you haven't heard, we're now on Roku. So we are streaming in, fill in the blank.
39 million.
30. I've got to remember that. 39 million homes through the Roku channel. So again, if you aren't able to watch the live, you can of course find any episode on Roku. Again, Julia Patrick, this is her brainchild, and I'm just a lucky co-host right here beside her. Julia Patrick is the CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. Myself, Jarrett Ransom, the nonprofit nerd, CEO of the Raven Group. And for today's Monday show, I am really excited to have Phil join us with Ability 360. And we just had, as we do with all of our guests, before we go into the chitty chat session, a little bit of offline conversation. Phil, I have not had the great honor to meet you in person. So this is a privilege for me, an honor for me. I have been to your location, your Ability 360, and it is phenomenal. So welcome to the show, Phil.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Hey, Phil, let's start out kind of simply, I guess. It's not so simple because I know your facility. Talk to us about Ability 360, because I associate your work with a place, but it really goes beyond just a place. So talk to us about what you all do, including your mission and really the vision that you have for us.
Yeah, well, we're a center for independent living, and we started off, we're like one of literally 400 or 500 centers for independent living that are all across the country that got established with because of the Rehabilitation Act in 1973. They amended the act in 78 to include funding for independent living centers like Ability 360. So that was we were designed originally as really grassroots disability rights kinds of organizations that were required to provide 4 core services: independent living skills instruction, peer support, advocacy, and information and referral. And more recently, they added a 5th core service, which was transition services, either transition from nursing homes or youth transition services, or transition from hospital to home, and that sort of thing. So those were the core services that centers were required to provide. And we got started, Ability 360 got started in 1981. We originally were called ABLE, or Arizona Bridge to Independent Living. And more recently, we changed our name about 5 years ago to Ability 360. Kind of wanted to modernize it and hip it up a little bit. We kind of felt like people thought we were a nursing home, and we did not want to be known as a nursing home. Nothing. Sure. So anyway, that's kind of why we changed the name. But that's generally the roots of our organization. But we've tried to be very progressive, and we've grown into what you see now, especially with our, the Ability 360 Center, and we can talk more about that in a little bit. But again, started out very modestly, but we've been progressive, and again, we've expanded the kinds of programming over the years that we've offered, and it's been important for people with disabilities.
So Phil, tell me, when was Ability 360 established? When did you become a 501c3?
1984.
84. So, okay.
That's when we officially got the IRS designation. But we had actually opened the doors in 1981.
Got it.
And there were a bunch of people in Phoenix that were working on this, trying to get something started as early as like 75, in the mid
Oh
70s
yeah.
to the late 70s. But it wasn't until 1981 that they officially got some funding and were able to get an office and start the organization.
Wow, what an evolution. And a lot on the show, we've really been talking, Phil, with so many nonprofit leaders just like yourself about how the pandemic, of course, has made all of us reimagine who we are, what we do, how we provide those services. So to have in context how long Ability 360 has been navigating and evolving, I think is a great point to share with all of our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, well, the COVID situation has really, it's been very hard. It's been very hard for, certainly anybody living with a disability, who has to worry about it. And most people that have disabilities, they usually have some other chronic health condition that may go along with it. So folks have really had to hunker down, and they're isolated. They're staying home. I know I'm sick of it. I mean, I, I'm at my house most of the time. I go out and get groceries and that sort of thing. But this is a very difficult time with isolation. And that's one thing our programs have done a really good job of, is that we've continued to offer a lot of our programs virtually, whether it's workshops or trainings, support groups. Even our sports and fitness center has offered a lot of personal training classes done virtually. So in fact, it was interesting because we had just upped our subscription to Zoom right before the pandemic hit, and we were getting really familiar with Zoom and how to use it, and we had created a Zoom room in our boardroom, and then the pandemic hit. So it was timely that we were figuring that technology out, and it's come in really handy.
Do you
Wow.
have a crystal ball, Phil?
Yeah, I wish I did.
Right? Man, I mean, but what a great pivot at that time, definitely relevant. So wow, that's just amazing that you had the foresight to add that.
So let's talk more about the Sports and Fitness Center, because I know your facility in two parts. I know it as this amazing center for many different types of organizations that serve the disability community, policy, investments, that side. But then you have this other like physical behemoth. It's a stunning, stunning fitness center at the back of your property. And it is, in my mind, when you go in, not that I've been to a lot of world-class training centers, but it looks almost like it could be an Olympic training site, and it looks like a very exclusive high-end training facility. Then once you get in, you realize that it's been designed for people of all different types of disabilities. It's so unique.
Multi-tenant building with all the nonprofits that are in there with us, and they're all organizations that serve people with disabilities, and the Sports and Fitness Center. When we conceived of this and really started dreaming about it and wanting to do it, we wanted this to be over the top. We wanted it to be beautiful, and we wanted it to be empowering. And so often in the past, or the programs for people with disabilities usually got housed in some old, government building that was no longer good enough for the government to use.
Right.
And so, the disability organization would get that old dilapidated building. And we were like, that's not what we're doing. We're going to do something that is over the top and is beautiful. And that's really what our goal was. So, and I think we achieved that.
It is stunning. And I think one of the things that I love about the concept that you created a facility that has, if you will, office housing, or, it has structure for all these nonprofits. So when you go into your facility, it's pretty stunning to see all of the different types of nonprofit businesses that are in there that all speak to the same issue. And so it's something that is just the most cool thing to see, because I think we could be doing that in other sectors. Before we go on, we have a question from Chris that came in, and it says, does your organization, Phil, support people who are blind or who have low vision?
We don't have we do, of course. I mean, because as a Center for Independent Living, we're cross disability, so we serve people with all types of disabilities. So if someone is blind or has low vision, I mean, we certainly have programs that we can offer them. Now, what I will say though is where if we can't serve somebody very effectively, we would refer them to an organization that would be better served. You know, there's not an organization in our building that serves the blind community, but we know they exist. We know who they are in the Phoenix area, and we would refer people to them if that was necessary, if we couldn't provide them. But for instance, I mean, like our employment program, no matter what your disability, if you qualify to get services through our employment program, we would provide it to you.
Awesome. Awesome. Let's ask you a little bit more about fund development. I'm curious, and Jarrett brought this up when we first started off. I'd love to know how the fund development process has changed for you during COVID. You all do so many different things. Are you seeing certain areas come ahead, or is it slog all the way through, or can you kind of paint a picture for us?
Yeah, well, it's definitely put a crimp in us to do much of that. We had our breakfast fundraiser that was scheduled for April was canceled, of course. So, and then we were thinking about maybe hosting it in September, and then that wasn't going to happen either. So now we're looking at doing a virtual fundraiser here coming up in the fall in the kind of the October-November timeframe. So we have a plan, and we're working on the concept and how it's gonna work, but it will be a virtual fundraiser, and it'll kind of lead into our annual end of the year annual appeal. So it's definitely changed everything. I mean, it's just, it's a tough time. In fact, one of our major champions of the organization that had been someone in the community that has been a champion for Ability 360. He was our MC for 3 of our breakfasts, Mike McQuaid, who passed away. And he's a real prominent person in the philanthropic community in Phoenix, and just really, we were really saddened about his passing.
Yeah. One of the things that we keep hearing, Jarrett and I, the number of people that have kind of gone into these virtual events, kicking and screaming, really frightened, not knowing how it's going to go, extreme stress over this, but that end up coming ahead with a much higher level of engagement at a lower cost. And so, that's one of those things that maybe that might be part of this process for Ability 360, is that you end up engaging more people from different places further away, and then creating something that's really a new way to go and that's magical. And one of the things Jarrett and I are always asking folks too about is what are the things that you're going to keep, when we get back to normal. And we kind of suspect it might be these virtual events that people are like, wow, this has been working, or this worked. And so we want to,
well, and I was gonna say, Julia, yeah, that silver lining above and beyond, enhancing your Zoom ability, because you definitely did that, and you were probably, a trendsetter when it came to the Zoom accessibility. but really, like, what has been your silver lining? What has been some silver linings with Ability 360 due to the default reimagined state? And what are some things that you've realized, wow, this is actually a really great opportunity, is serving us well, it's serving our community well? What have been some of those really silver linings, Phil, that maybe, we wouldn't have seen pre-COVID?
Well, I think we are able to serve people in rural communities that can connect with us through some of our virtual programming that otherwise wouldn't have, and we wouldn't have been working so hard to reach them. And so I think that is definitely a permanent change that I think will continue to offer more programming that is, hopefully at someday we get back to being in person, but we can do it both in person and virtually at the same time, and be able to really, again, reach folks that otherwise, can't get to us, because it's not everybody lives right around us.
Right. And transportation is always an issue for everyone, right? Even when it comes to just scheduling our time. But if you're an individual that may not have the ability to drive, and you rely on transportation from other places, I would love to ask your thoughts, and this is completely organic, but I was talking to my son who's now 10, and he asked me, Mom, have you seen these self-driving cars? Have you seen them in our neighborhood? Because I see them all over town. And I'm like, well, I have seen some. What are your thoughts about it? And he said, and I'd love to know your thought on this, Phil, especially as it relates to the demographics of individuals you serve. He said, I always think that there's someone in there that may not have the ability to drive, and it's giving them freedom.
Yeah. Well, that is so true. And, there are people in the disability community, and I am one of them, because I've sat on some committees working on some of this policy work around autonomous vehicles, and there's advocates actively involved with trying to push some of this accessibility issues to the industry, because we see the potential for folks with disabilities to have far greater independence than they currently have. If you're blind and you can't drive, or if you just have a significant physical disability and you can't drive, being able to get into an autonomous vehicle independently, and you get there, the ramp comes down, the door opens, the ramp comes down, you get in, you can park your if it's a power chair, you can park yourself. It secures you independently. You push a button, everything folds, the ramp comes up, the door shuts, and the car takes off. And you're all by yourself. You don't have anybody else with you. And that's the way it should be. And the auto industry, we can do this. We've got the technology to make autonomous vehicles accessible to people with all types of disabilities. And it wouldn't matter whether you were deaf, hard of hearing, blind, intellectual disability, physical disability. We have the ability to do it. We got to find the will to make sure the industry does it, because we know how sometimes that gets left behind.
Pushed, right. Phil, we've got a question that's come in from Paula, and she writes, Phil, does your organization serve older adults, those who need to build agility, some who may need chair exercises, etc.?
Well, yeah, we do, because the Sports and Fitness Center, we have the Silver Sneakers programs, and a range. We even have a pickleball program for folks that want to. I know the seniors love the pickleball, right?
Yeah.
And but we've been offering the virtual personal training that seniors could access. So yeah, we do. And we also operate a large personal assistant services program that probably 70% of the people that we serve in that program, providing in-home, non-medical in-home care to probably 70% of those people are 65 and older. So we're we serve a lot of seniors. Absolutely.
Wow, amazing. Well, it's hard to believe, but our time is like winding down. I mentioned before we got started, it would go by fast, and even I'm shocked at how fast it goes by. But looking at your bio and reading up on you before you came in, I have to ask you about wheelchair rugby, because I know that that's something that you were one of the first folks to start a league. Rugby is a terrifying thing to me. To navigate it in a wheelchair, I can't believe.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I did play wheelchair rugby for quite a while. I was probably about 30 years old when I first started playing, so I already was over the hill when I started playing, and I played until I was 48. So, and I'm 60 now, so I hung in there for a long time with it, and it was really one of the best things for me personally, because it did a lot for me, both physically but also psychologically too. Just really good for one's self-esteem. But related to that, your earlier question about the sports and fitness center and the accessibility of it. See, part of what I experienced as a young wheelchair athlete was that there wasn't accessibility in sports and fitness centers. And so even though, being the CEO of Ability 360 and then having the opportunity to embark on a project to build a sports and fitness center, we knew that we could do this in such a way that was going to be so accessible for people with all types of disabilities and that's why when you come into our facility, you will notice all the different features of it that make it accessible. But it really was, I must admit, it was my roots back to playing wheelchair rugby and all those years of being in gymnasiums that were not accessible to folks with disabilities that led me to want to do this project and build our center. So it comes full circle, I guess.
Kudos to you, Phil. It's just amazing, fantastic to hear so much of the stories behind the scenes. And I'm in awe. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Phil, we mentioned this early getting going. You are in the exciting position to be retiring at the end of the year. And so you've given your organization almost a year to be really thoughtful about this next stewardship, about moving forward. What do you see for the future? I mean, think about starting, Ability 360. We didn't have email. We didn't have all the things that we take for granted now to run an organization. What do you think the stewardship for the next 20 years? You've been there for 20 years. What does the next 20 years look like?
I
it's a big question.
It is. The organization, the possibilities are endless. I'm hopeful that I will be so surprised that what we'll end up doing next and getting involved in next, and that it'll way outdo anything I did and was a part of. That would be a great thing to happen, and I'm hopeful that it is going to happen. So, and I'm really optimistic about the younger generation. They're smart. They know what they're doing. They're going to take Ability 360 to the next level. I'm confident of that.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, you've been a real champion for the disability community. As we were talking, people from all over the world come to look at your facility to understand what you've done and how you've championed the sector, and you've done it beautifully in so many ways. And so we are super honored that you have been with us today and that you've left a legacy that's going to be pretty hard to top, I would think. So thank you very, very much. Hey, I want to thank Jarrett Ransom, the Nonprofit Nerd, for co-hosting another episode of the Nonprofit Show. Jarrett, thank you so very much for all you do and for being here. Again, I'm Julia Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. We've been joined today by just a really cool leader in the nonprofit community, Phil Pangrazio. And as you journey forth on looking at this next legacy of leadership, we'd love to hear how it goes, because this is a big thing. Leading your organization for 2 decades, looking for that next leader, that in itself is a big show and a big story. And so we're going to be watching to see how that goes for you and your organization. We want to remind everybody that we are on Roku now. You can check us out. We've got the ability to go into 39 million, that's with an M, homes across this great nation. You just have to speak into your smart remote, and that's not your husband, by the way, or your wife. Grab that smart remote.
Da-dun-da.
Oh, you know, I've been married for 42 years, and the remote is the one thing that is like, ooh. But anyway, speak into that. If you're dialed in, your smart speaker, you can do that as well. And you can just say the word nonprofit or the nonprofit show, and you'll be amazed. We come up. It's pretty dang cool. We want to also thank our sponsors. Without you, we would not be here. So we're very grateful that you stepped up to help us navigate this conversation across our country. The Nonprofit Show comes to you daily. And so we are so delighted that you've been here. Go ahead, check us out. We have a big lineup this week of guests. And again, thank you ever so much. I'm Julia. Phil, have a great day. Stay cool.
Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Jarrett. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me today.
It's been great. We will see you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.